Joliet,
Here.
Jackson,
Here.
Loops,
Here.
Nelson.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Excellent. Next up, we'll move on to the Pledge of Allegiance. Let's all stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next up, we'll move on to the approval of the minutes. If there aren't any corrections or changes, do we have a motion for the committee minutes dated January 25th, 2022? Motion by Commissioner Loop, support by Commissioner Joliet. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next up, we'll move on to the approval of the agenda. Do we have a motion? Motion by Commissioner Loop, support by Commissioner Gershenson. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Agenda's approved. Next up, we'll move on to public comment. This is our first public comment portion that is for items related to the agenda. At this time, I'll open public comment. Is there anyone from the public who would like to address the Legislative Affairs and Government Operations Committee this morning? Alrighty, seeing none, I will close public comment. Given we don't have any communication items or consent agenda items, move on down to our regular agenda. We've got first agenda item, A, Board of Commissioners, appointment to OCHN interviews. At this time, for the interview portion, I'd like to request that cameras be turned off.
I'd love to keep that other woman's application active.
Sure.
We keep them on file for a year.
Okay.
So
Alrighty. Okay. Just as a little recap, during our last LAGO meeting last month, we reviewed multiple different applications and resumes for 2 seats on the OCHN board. And during that last meeting, we narrowed down 4 different applicants. And this morning, we interviewed 4 different individuals. There were 2 individuals that we interviewed for filling the seat of representing agency / working in mental health. We had 2 really great and amazing candidates come before us this morning, as well as we also conducted 2 interviews under the general public seat on the OCHN board. After our interviews this morning and having some brief discussions in regards to the applicants, we are moving forward with recommending, do we have a motion for Yvette Woodruff as the representing agency working in mental health member and Sarah May as the general public member? Motion by Commissioner Lubes, support by Commissioner Joliet. Roll call. Oh, before we go into roll call, is there anything that anyone would like to share? Commissioner Jackson.
I would like to go on record again, and I know we discussed this in our prior meeting. We did have original deadlines for applications to these positions that we extended because of the insertion of board members that were coming up for their term to be ended. So we as a committee did approve accepting applications for a time period longer than normally given out to the public. So I just wanted for that part to go on record in case there's any type of consternation about that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Commissioner Jackson. And as always, this process isn't easy. The OCHN, Oakland Community Health Network Board, is a very active board, and I think we all can agree that not only has this board always been significant here in Oakland County, but especially in light of the pandemic and just the mental health concerns and needs that we've seen become even more exacerbated in light of the pandemic. So I would like to say again that we truly do appreciate and thank all those individuals who did apply and expressed interest in serving on the OCHN board. With that being said, prompt the vote, please.
Madam Chair, you have 4 yeas and 1 nay.
4 yeas, 1 nay, motion carries. Thank you, everyone. Next up, we'll move on to item B of our regular agenda, Human Resources, Other Action, Extension of Certified Eligibility List. Do we have a motion? Motion by Commissioner Joliet, support by Commissioner Lubes. And I believe we have Valerie Jefferson here with us this morning. So good morning, Valerie.
Good morning. How are you guys doing?
Doing great, thank you.
Good. Yes, I would like for the, this is my first time doing this, as a matter of fact, and I'm excited and I'm nervous at the same time. Extension list that we would like to have, it's for the Sheriff's Department. And the reason we want the extension list is because they do an extensive background when they're hiring their candidates, and this will allow them to continue with their backgrounds while the candidate is still on the eligible list.
Valerie, are you able to come on camera?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
No problem.
I thought I had the camera on earlier and I cut it off because no one else had theirs on. I'm sorry.
No,
That's all right, that's a
no.
rookie mistake, Valerie, we
No.
understand.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Valerie, I do have a quick question. How long is the extension?
Okay, so the eligibility list right now, they are always good for 6 months under the merit rule. And what we had been doing was allowing the departments, we now have it, every department has a 6-month eligibility list. Only the sheriff's department, we would like for them to extend theirs for the 1 year because of their background checks.
I see. Thank you. Commissioners, any questions? Oh, Commissioner Gershenson?
So are you aware that these positions have been difficult to fill?
Yes, for the sheriff's department, yes.
Okay, and you feel the extension will help that process?
Oh, definitely help the oh, yes, definitely. Because what happens is, let's say that they're in the middle of a background check and the list expires, then they have to wait. The applicant has to reapply again on the new eligibility in order to be considered.
Say no more.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Jackson?
Thank you, and thank you, Ms. Jefferson, for coming before us today. I just have a quick question because, and it's more so in regards to HR procedures.
Yes.
Eligibility lists or letters in the past have been sent out to applicants that have come before me to say, I was told I was eligible, or I passed the initial test, and I never heard from the county again. These people on this list, will they be updated to let them know the process in the hiring or the point in the hiring process that they're in? Are they communicated to keep them abreast of what's going on?
I will be honest with you. We are currently working on that right now to keep all the applicants abreast to what is going on. When we have an extended eligibility list, because the list right now, the most of the departments is for 6 months. We let them know at that time, but also be aware that when we do send out the list indicating you're in the top group, they are competing with everyone that is in that top group.
And so I think that there could be a disconnect with the people that are trying to seek employment. They might fall out of the system or get disillusioned with the process. So, and I know that these positions are very critical because the sheriff's office has come before us to express how difficult it's been lately for them to secure new hires. So just a suggestion, if that's a case in point at all, in any means or any ways, just to communicate with our people that apply a little bit more succinctly. Thank you.
Believe it or not, oh yes, we're working with the sheriff's department in that aspect of better communication, just so you are aware.
Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Jefferson.
Excellent. Commissioner
Thank
Johnson?
you.
Thank you. Maybe you can educate me a little bit, because I know some people that have applied for these positions, and it's my understanding that these people need to go through a training that's required by the county to be eligible to apply for some of these positions. Do you know about that? Yes.
Okay.
It could be like correctional facility or correctional officer.
The correctional officer, the test is the MSCTC.
Okay.
That's what they, yes, some of them.
And is there a time frame as to when that expires from when they take it?
That I'm not sure of, but we do not handle that aspect of it. They have to contact the local community college, and it lets them know of the MSCTC. And what happens is when they apply, they let the school know, give Oakland County access to view that.
Okay, because there's a specific applicant that I know that did that and is concerned because the hiring process is taking so long, his test will expire and he'll have to redo it. And I didn't know if that addressed this or not, this resolution.
No, it will not.
Okay.
But if you do me a favor, when we get off, send me a message and let me know the applicant's name so I can see where he's at in the process. If
All right.
he is in the process, actually.
All right, thank you.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome, no problem.
Any other, Commissioner Gershenson?
I just wanted to close by saying it's very nice to meet you, Ms. Jefferson, because what you're hearing from this board are the repeated concerns from applicants about the process of how long it takes. And so we want to be sure to send that message to you and to your team that,
Oh, thank you. I truly appreciate that.
thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you. Yes.
Any other questions or comments on this item? All right, seeing none, roll call, please, or prompt the vote.
Madam Chair, you have 5 yeas, 0 nays.
5 yeas, 0 nays, motion carries. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Ms. Jefferson.
Thank you for having me.
Next up, we'll move on to item C of the regular agenda, Human Resources Resolution to increase the salary grade for the Equalization Officer classification. Do we have a motion? Motion by Commissioner Jackson, support by Commissioner Lubes. Good morning, Heather. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm presenting this on behalf of April Lynch. As you're aware, Oakland County current position of Equalization Officer posted as an open competitive examination, which opened on December 6th of 2021. And in that time, we've received 5 applications, and only 2 of which met the requirements to be placed on the certified eligibility list. The role of this position is critical to the well-being of Oakland County and provides data and trend analysis to other organizations for their financial and budgetary planning, including local municipal governments, Oakland schools, and Oakland Community College. Because of this, receiving so few applications was a cause for concern that potentially the salary range was not sufficient to attract more candidates. Both candidates that are on the certified eligibility list are currently being paid close to the top of our current salary range. The Human Resources Department conducted a review of the point factor evaluations assigned to this classification and determined that there were 4 factors that were placed lower than would be appropriate for the duties and responsibilities and the authority of this classification. Increasing these factors would bring the recommended salary grade up from grade 131, which has a maximum salary of $138,323, to grade 133 with a maximum salary of $152,502. Therefore, the Human Resources Department is requesting approval to increase the salary grade of the Equalization Officer. And I would be happy to answer any questions you may have regarding this analysis.
Excellent. Thank you, Heather. Commissioner Lubes, followed by Commissioner Gershenson.
Heather, is there somebody in this position now?
No, it is currently vacant.
And how long has it been vacant?
I believe it's December.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lubes. Commissioner Gershenson.
Good morning, Heather.
Good morning.
So was this reviewed in the compensation study?
It was. When we pulled the point factor evaluations that Management Advisory Group had assigned to it, which we only received access to once the Board of Commissioners approved the compensation and classification study. That's when we had access to be able to look at these and see how they were evaluated.
And so you're saying that after the compensation study, it was at grade 131? And then
Yes.
upon posting it, you are gleaning that you went back and looked at the study and found out there were areas that were not properly designated, or?
That is correct.
Can you tell us what those areas were?
Absolutely. So the 4 factors that we are looking at increasing are factor 1, which is organizational responsibility. And this factor takes into account the responsibility for the classification. It was initially evaluated by Management Advisory Group at level 5, which is consistent with a high-level supervisor. or an administrator of a program. And we're proposing to increase that to factor level 7, which is consistent with division managers.
What's the top,
another
what is the top on that? What's the top? Is there a higher level than 7, or it stops at 7?
Yes, it actually goes up to 10.
Okay.
Level 8 would be a director of a small department. Level 9 would be director of a large department, and then it goes up to deputy CEO, top administrator, or CEO.
Got it. Thank you.
The second factor we're looking at increasing is mathematical requirements. It was assigned a level 4, which is associated with the practical application of math, such as percentages, ratios, and algebraic equations. And we're proposing to increase this factor to level 5, which is indicative of high-level classifications that utilize financial and econometric models. The statistical analysis and the maths required of the equalization division are quite a bit higher than simple percentages and ratios. So we feel that would be more appropriate to increase that factor. The third factor is the communications requirement. It's currently placed at level 7, meaning the classification reads technical journals, abstracts, and financial reports, and speaks to professional groups. However, the equalization officer reads and interprets proposed and newly passed state property tax laws and provides an explanation and guidance to high-level political and economic groups, as well as schools and professional organizations. Therefore, we're recommending that it be increased to level 8 to be more consistent with that level of communications. And the final factor that we are recommending increasing is factor 11, which is the impact of errors. And this factor takes into account what impact the decisions and recommendations of a position or a classification may have as far as to the organization, meaning Oakland County government as a whole, or other organizations or the general public. And currently, the equalization officer was placed at level 7, which indicates that the decisions and recommendations would have a serious effect on the organization and may impact other organizations and the general public. We're recommending that it would be more accurately placed at level 8, meaning that the decisions and recommendations will impact other organizations as well as individual property owners throughout Oakland County. Not having a correct assessment on a property owner's real estate could result in a property owner having too high of property taxes that they have to pay, or if it's under assessed, can impact our general fund.
Thank you, Heather. I understand.
Excellent, thank you.
You're welcome.
We do have Deputy Sean Carlson here with us. Mr. Carlson, would you like to give any additional insight?
Yeah, I just wanted to share, this is one of my areas of responsibility, so management and budget does fall under one of my areas, and of course, the equalization division falls under management and budget. Very critical role. I think it was earlier asked, there is a vacancy. It's not uncommon in HR or government that if somebody is in a position for a long period of time and that there's a vacancy, that the market has changed. Although there's compensation studies that are sometimes done, the reality of it is when you actually have people bidding for a job and what are those salary requirements. This is a big job in the county, has many employees, I think over 80 employees in the division. Very critical role, externally facing, very important in regards to interpreting Headley, as you all know, is a very difficult concept in itself. Sometimes serves somewhat as an economic analysis person for the county as well. So a very critical role. But I think my point is that the jobs, and Heather mentioned it, as the applications came in, we found out that, hey, we need to reassess this position. So we 100% endorse what's in front of you today.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Carlson. Commissioner Joliet.
Quick question. I completely agree that it is a critical position and impacts us financially. Were there any studies or looking at surrounding counties that are our size to see what similar positions are getting paid?
We do have some local market compensation information. We looked at not only our local counties, also some of the larger cities in the area. Within the city of Detroit, the deputy chief assessor has a maximum salary of $158,039. The city of Ann Arbor's assessor services manager, pardon me, they've got long titles, the maximum salary is $152,740. Wayne County's position is $138,345. The city of Grand Rapids is maximum of $133,432. So when we would look at the population of the area as well as the assessing program as a whole.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. I do have one question. With the 10% increase, were there documents that were uploaded with this item to the agenda that demonstrate the 10% increase?
Do you mean as far as the factor evaluations or?
So any of the documentation that was utilized for the increase of the 10% of this position. So any studies or supporting documentation, was there any that were attached with this item?
No, I don't believe there were. I can send them to you.
That would be great. Thank you, Heather. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Commissioners, any other questions, comments in regards to this agenda item? All righty, seeing none, please prompt the vote.
Madam Chair, you have 5 yeas, 0 nays.
5 yeas, 0 nays, motion carries. Thank you so much, Heather, for joining us.
Thank you.
All righty. Next up, we're on to item number D, which is Human Resources, resolution for the transfer of positions and deletion of the Central Services Department and for the creation of performance management positions. Do we have a motion? Motion by Commissioner Joliet, support by Commissioner Lubes, and I believe we've both got Deputy Sean Carlson here, and I believe Deputy Hillary Chambers. So Hillary, if you want to come join, feel free as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is a reorganization that we have been planning really for well over a year in terms of how we analyze the department structure and the deputy structure. So it really starts with evaluating how we wanted to handle the Central Services Department once Dave Vanderveen retired. And so we thought it would be the most efficient way to restructure, and Sean will describe, the background there in terms of why we thought we could eliminate a director position and send, both sections of Central Services to other areas where they better aligned. And then that would free up, because we always want to come to you with the resources to pay for, new positions, that would free up some funds for us to really focus in on 2 critical positions to our performance management system that we began to talk to you about almost 2 years ago when Sean presented the first budget under his tenure. So, Sean, do you want to describe the reorg and the performance management positions?
Yes. So in the reorganization, so the Central Services right now has, I believe, 3 divisions. The garage, the mail room and records retention, And then also the airport. The airport is an external-facing organization, obviously. We feel that it is best realigned with economic development. It presents and is economic development in its outright in regards to the activity that takes place. So we're looking to have that division fall under economic development. Cheryl Bush, who runs the airports, will report directly to me. And then in regards to the mailroom and records retention as well as the garage, that will fit nicely at those divisions falling within facilities. Those are internal-facing organizations, and we believe that there will be more operational efficiencies garnered falling under the facilities department. So that is the rationale of why we put the divisions, what we're proposing. I'll stop there for a second.
Commissioner Gershenson, followed by Commissioner Joliet.
Thank you, Mr. Carlson. So I'm very familiar with Cheryl Bush and the great work that she does over at airports. I'm excited about that. And then the switch over of garage, mailroom, records retention to facilities seems to make sense. So that would go under Ed Joss over in facilities. And then is that a new position you're suggesting to handle those three entities?
No.
So someone over there would take on these responsibilities?
Well, the current division managers would then
transferred.
just report with the mailroom and retention as well as the garage. They'll just report to Ed Joss, and then Cheryl will report to myself at this point.
I got it. So
You're
there's
probably familiar with Todd Burkle, so he's still there and would report to facilities.
And so there's no salary impact with making this?
No.
Yeah, sounds good.
So then that leads us to kind of talk about what we view as a more effective use of those resources in terms of the county's performance management system and the effort that we're undertaking right now to have our departments really work through having some key performance indicators and ways to measure their overall goals and also all of the services that they perform. This is very much a work in progress, which is why we feel it's so critical to have these positions in place right now. Because you'll hear from Sean, there's a lot of work that we're undertaking in terms of training, in terms of planning, in terms of data collection that goes into the whole entire performance management system. And so far, we've only had a handful of departments go through this process. And we really want to bring these two individuals on so that they can be involved in that next phase where the remaining departments will go through the training and go through the process.
Yeah. And if I can just rewind a little bit, if we go back to I think it's almost 24 months ago, when County Executive Dave Coulter gave his first State of the County, is when we introduced the idea of key performance indicators in Oakland County. And so we've been on that journey, and then shortly thereafter, probably a month and a half later, when we started introducing, which would have been at that point in time, the 2021 budget, and going through that process, we started communicating with all of the county executive departments as well as the elected departments of this walk towards key performance indicators, of measuring our progress as a county. This is an example of good government, of understanding. Certainly, there might have been measurements of AAA rating and fund balance, but KPIs is much more than just those two items. KPIs is understanding what we're doing in each of the departments. What services are we providing to our cities, villages, and townships, to our residents, to our businesses, and understanding and measuring and being accountable and putting and being transparent with that. So we introduced those concepts 24 months ago, and then as we brought on our new budget director, Kyle Jen, we started leaning into KPIs, and last year, starting in January, after Dave Coulter was elected for a 4-year term, we leaned in and worked on establishing a vision and a mission for this county, as well as objectives and how those flow. KPIs, you'll hear that terminology, but I want people to understand that there's community indicators that are key performance indicators as well, but we're differentiating by calling them community indicators, that we're measuring progress as it relates to outside of the county government. And then there's departmental KPIs, key performance indicators. And then we also went through a process called service level inventory. Sometimes in government, there can just be this routine that just perpetuates, and people don't really even understand. 20, 25 years ago, you might have been providing a service. Did anybody raise their hand and say, we don't do that anymore with the technology? So it was very important for us to do an analysis in each department and ask that question. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? Does it still need to be done? If it does, how can we enhance it and how can we make it better? We have to be good stewards of the tax dollars. So we see this very much as a budget part, but it's much more than a budget part. True KPIs, if they're done correctly, is really the mark of a good government. And not very many governments or municipalities really embrace measuring their performance and putting it out to the public, to how they're doing and how they're performing. But we think it's important. And what's also important about this as we establish this, it's the process of establishing KPIs too. Real KPIs, if they're working, isn't everybody's always in green. The real value comes when sometimes we might see something in red or yellow, and I'm using a color chart, and you might be familiar that if you're not meeting your goal. But that's when people come together and strategize, where the directors strategize with the managers and the division directors and so forth. What are we doing wrong? What do we need to do differently? And some of this is strategizing with our strategic partners, whether that be Automation Alley or SEMCOG or Waterford Township, whatever the case is. What do we need to do? And that collaboration builds synergies and how to understand. And so that's really the essence of KPIs, is building that synergies. It's not just simply measuring in itself. It's the measurement process if you're not achieving that goal. And how do we get the most out of the tax dollars that we're supposed to be good stewards with? So this is a process that we're taking on. And of course, you just heard about the Central Services Department. So with the elimination of that director position, it's very important for us to have a couple of individuals that help lift this program off, that their sole focus is on key performance indicators, that they're helping the departments understand that when they're not making the mark, how do we intervene? What do we need to do? How do we need to have a focus? There's a lot of briefings that will take place internally, externally, and over here with the commissioners and how we're doing. So these two positions that we're asking for in place of Mr. Vanderveen's vacancy will help us lift the key performance indicators, and very critical to the success of this program.
If I can just say one thing about the timing. We had previously, and we still are, been working with Public Policy Associates who brought on Andrew Klein, who really is a nationally known expert in this area. He undertook this effort at Montgomery County, he undertook this effort in Baltimore, and we've really been relying on him. So he's been doing all of the training of all of our department directors, and then all of the workshopping with the ones that have gone through it. And so we kind of feel an urgency to bring on these individuals so that they can also be trained by him and take the lead going forward, so that we can have this embedded in our organization and we're not reliant on outside consultants to do this. You know, this is a work in progress for all of us, really. I mean, we've been learning as we're going with Andrew, and we really think it's important that we have individuals who can learn from him and then take over the overall effort after we no longer have outside assistance.
Excellent. Thank you. So with that being said, so it is my understanding that the executive office will continue to retain Mr. Vanderveen as a part-time project advisor, base pay of $36,952. How long will Mr. Vanderveen be retained, and is there a conflict with his retirement and being a part-time employee?
Well, thank you very much for that question. You know, to a certain extent, we're here in February as opposed to last August, because none of us really wanted Dave Vanderveen to retire. He has been a very loyal, talented director under numerous administrations, and we value his experience, his judgment, and his wealth of knowledge. And so when, we got to the time period where it really made sense for him to retire, we certainly talked to him about wanting, to the extent that it's possible with his retirement plans, to continue to leverage his expertise and his experience. And so, I would say to you that that is a work in progress in terms of the time that he's able to spend and in terms of the projects that we have. As you know, his assignment as the county executive's person on the parks is something that he's passionate about, he's really knowledgeable about, and we want to keep using his efforts there. And of course, his whole entire career has been dedicated to that airport. Mm-hmm. So, having him serve on the airport committee makes perfect sense to us. There is no conflict. As many of you know, Dave is older than 59 and a half, and he also is part of the DB plan. So he doesn't trigger any need to have, that kind of separation that the county ran into when they had the issues with the IRS several years ago. So thank you very much for clarifying that. So, I think how long it goes, how many hours a week it is, it really depends on the needs that the county executive has for his experience. But, I don't want to, when we have someone who has served so long and has so much experience around the county on so many issues, it's nice to be able to know that he still wants to stay engaged with you and that you have him, available to serve the county executive.
Yeah, and there's some pending litigation that's at the airport that's very critical to maintain his expertise and that value. So job knowledge transfer is very, very important to us.
Excellent, thank you. Just in regard to KPIs, so I understand that there's a performance management software system that'll be utilized to create internal, external dashboards. Do we know if that's been purchased, developed yet? And then my second question in regards to KPIs is there a timetable for the implementations?
Yes, the software, we piggybacked off of, I believe, one of, I'm not sure if it was a GSA contract or my deal, but I'll have to verify that. So we use that as our opportunity. We did review a couple of different softwares, and we settled on, a lot of ClearPoint. There was a lot that had clear in their name, so I just want to make sure. So ClearPoint was the one that we selected. We visited some of the websites and some of the other municipalities that they've worked in, counties across the country, and liked the way that looked and felt. And it's very important to try to make this seem seamless. It won't be seamless in the beginning because it's going to be new for every department. But uploading that documentation and those statistics will be important for every department.
Excellent. And as far as the timetable for the implementations of the KPIs?
Well, it's a really extensive process because they're building out, the dashboard and the internal mechanisms. And what you'll find is that we are spending a lot of time making sure that if we establish a measurement, we know how we're going to measure that, and that data is regularly available. So Andrew has been working with the directors to make sure, like, if you establish this as one of the 5 department level goals, what is your data source? And so that's why the second position here, the data analyst, is really critical because, there is a breadth of, we're hopeful that each department will have 5 headline KPIs. And that means that there's a measurement for every KPI. Then they go through the process of identifying their services. For every service, there's 5 KPIs. So that's 5 different ways that you measure your service. How much are we doing? How well are we doing it? Is there equity involved in how we're doing it? There's 5 questions that they have to ask themselves and have data for all of that. So it will be kind of rolled out over time. And that's why, right now, it's kind of been a team effort with the directors and IT and communications. And that's why having someone kind of lead this and having a data person is so critical to our being able to kind of accelerate and finish the process. So hopefully by March, you'll see kind of the landing page and you'll see some of the major community indicators, and then later we'll roll out the department level KPIs in the next months.
Excellent, I appreciate that. And just my last question, will the cost of the KPIs for each of the departments come out of the departmental budget or the executives?
The cost of the software will come out of the executive
Executives.
budget. The cost, so that's that's a lot of the, so it's not a lot of cost. Interestingly, when Sean mentioned the budget, ultimately, our goal is to have a budget that we present to you that actually it will be similar to our KPIs because we'll have it by service. So that way, the budget will be broken down by service so that you'll be able to see how we're performing when you evaluate how much we're spending. So that really is kind of in the out year planning. But that is the ultimate the ultimate is to have our budget connected to our
Yes.
KPIs. So separate from what we're doing, Kyle is working with Andrew on how that is looked in other areas as well.
And I think that will make a more informed budget process as well, as the finance committee is having those multiple with all the county executive departments and electeds to, where is the performance. But I want to hesitate there. I don't believe the electeds have KPIs. It's the county executive.
Exactly, absolutely, yeah. Mhm.
Well, I appreciate you clarifying. Commissioner Gershenson, followed by Commissioner Joliet.
Yeah,
Followed by
thank you. I read all the material and, of course, was left pondering, what is KPI? I need you to repeat that. I need you to explain it. And I'm sure it's going to be an ongoing process because it is a very complicated concept, especially to those of us who are not in that, who aren't dealing with that type of thinking, really.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm assuming that the meetings that you've requested with commissioners about the performance management system will also go into this KPI introduction.
Yes, and thank you very much for that question, because I did want to also clarify that. It really is a work in process in terms of understanding. And it's going to be really important that we take our time as it relates to our employees as well. Because, when we say performance management system, we want to make sure that people understand that we're trying to create a learning culture. It's not a punitive system. So it's not about performance evaluation per se. It is about how do we as an organization perform better. So it really is probably going to be a series of briefings as we work our way through this process. The first sessions that Patty and I have discussed with commissioners who are interested is more to start talking about the strategic framework and the external goals that we see for the county's future in terms of when you think about what we need to accomplish to preserve our prosperity, whether it's environmental sustainability or our workforce, it's to really kind of engage with you around what the county executive sees as those external facing goals and the ways that you might measure our external process, whether it's labor market participation or the investment in the county. So that's kind of the first thing we want to talk to you about. We will reference how some of the KPIs stem from that, but that will be kind of a later time period when we start to get, when these positions are in place and we've made a little bit more progress. Also keeping in mind that we have 4 or 5 departments that are actually at the beginning of the process and they start their training in March.
That's very interesting, and I'm really glad you're taking the time to be sure the commissioners are up to date on this. Also, back to the Dave Vanderveen, it's listed on here that he will have a part-time salary, and then it is also listed the hourly rate. I mean, that it will be hourly. So can you just clarify for me, does a part-time position indicate that it's 1,000 hours? Is that part of a part-time position? Or how does the 1,000 hours play into it?
The 1,000 hours is a cap. So if you're a PTNE, you can't work more than 1,000 hours. It's possible that he might work 5 hours a week or 20 hours a month. It really is undetermined at this point.
So how is his time evaluated? How is it? figured out.
Generally, what happens with the PTNE is they have to submit their time, and then it's signed off on by their supervisor before it's submitted for for payment.
And it's
So-
an hourly rate.
It's an hourly rate, so
Yeah.
it's not, you don't get the 36,000.
Exactly.
So yeah, you're looking at the cap.
That wasn't really clear,
You're
right?
looking at the ceiling.
That wasn't really clear, but I appreciate that. Well, I think this is very exciting. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've heard about a system in place that is so old and that needs to be updated. So this is really exciting that we're going to be looking at all those processes and seeing what works today. It's a very different world we live in today, especially after COVID and people working at home and all the changes we've ensued. So I think it's a very exciting opportunity. I certainly look forward to becoming a little bit more knowledgeable about it.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Joliet, followed by Commissioner Lubes.
Thank you. I'm all for performance review and measuring outcomes and that kind of thing. And I know that this is a work in progress, but once it gets up and running, what's the frequency of evaluation?
Well, you probably have heard this lingo of like performance stat meetings, right? So we're going to call our regular meetings OakStat. And so that's when the department comes in and presents, their KPIs to a broad base of county leadership, and we talk about the progress and what we can do to support them, that type of thing. We see each department going through an OakStat session twice a year. So we would get each department in twice a year once we're up and running. We've started those sessions with those that have gone through the training, and that's when they first presented their ideas about what their department level KPIs would be. So we are kind of starting to get into that routine of 2 meetings a month, but that's what we envision going forward.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Lubes?
So moving forward with the key performance indicators, will this be for each employee?
No,
They
no,
don't.
that's it. This is an organizational system. So it is how the department measures how it's doing. The notion of how we handle our individual performance evaluations is a priority for HR to review the current system, which is somewhat outdated. But that is separate from the organizational performance.
And who decides the measurement for the KPIs for each department?
So it's been it is
It's a
like
collaborative
yeah,
process.
it's like a collaborative process. It's a workshop. Like generally when it started, the director would bring 5 or 6 people of their leadership for the full day workshop, and then it's like a brainstorming, where they had all these sticky notes and they put it together and they thought through what would be the best department level, and then they had to spend really weeks thinking through, well, how would you measure that, and then they worked with Andrew back and forth, and then they presented that, and then people asked questions. It was really probably about a 2-month process, which is kind of why, again, we're anxious for these positions, because we want these folks to go through that similar process so that they can, move it. When new people come on, they can onboard them to our system. But it really is a collaborative process and then doing the research to figure out, do we have the data? Is it regularly reported? Is it credible? And sometimes things are easier to measure or not. There are some things that we've decided that we want to create a measure for. So yeah, they go through a training process to figure out the best measurements.
Yeah, and this is an iterative process too. I mean, we could start off with a KPI in a department, and at some point in time, a year or 2 down the road, that could be, hey, that was a great indicator for us to get started. We've now matured to this indicator, and through collaboration, we say, hey, we're now taking the next step up. This is really a fundamental culture change. I mean, it is creating a scoreboard, really, but for each department on how well we're performing for our community, for our citizens, for our businesses. But at the same time, it's, hey, what do we need to change? Is there something else? And again, I mentioned it earlier, if something's not working out, how do we come together as a group to problem solve around that? And I think that's really, in essence, the discipline, and it creates a new culture.
For the data reporting, interface do you work with IT
What-
to make that dashboard?
Yeah, but it's a software that we're putting in. And Hillary just talked about it as well. It's really key, and that's why Andrew Klein was very helpful in this in regards to his national expertise in this. You know, sometimes you might create your own statistics, and that becomes a little bit more difficult, and he's really tried to veer people away of grabbing information that's not necessarily going to be arguable in the future, too. That's consistent data that you can get.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Jackson.
I just want to say, to me and what I'm hearing, this sounds exciting because as being a person who has worked 40 years in corporate America and working for industries like the banking industry that had a lot of consolidations and mergers, and the utility industry being the same, going through business process analysis and executed change did move us in a direction to become more strategic in our operations and
That's
really
right.
looking at what we do, because a lot of times we do things and we haven't been really paying attention to what we're doing or what the outcome is. And so this to me sounds like it'll take us in that direction in a way that would be uniform throughout our organization, because government, you know, traditionally hasn't been looked at as an organization. So my question is, just being part of this process in the past, is Andrew, is he going to be like, who's the facilitator? A lot of times you need people to facilitate the communication of this change. Who are we using as our facilitators?
With our employees, you know,
Yeah,
as we talk
start
about
at the top.
Right. And that, I'm really glad you asked about that, because that is really, really important. That's a work in progress. Andrew hasn't really had the experience as much on the change management, but our new deputy director that you may not have had a chance to meet yet in HR, he just started a few weeks ago, Sunil, he has a lot of experience in change management and communications with employees, and as it turns out, so does Charlotte Fisher, our new director of public communications. So April and Andrew and Charlotte and they've been, and Sunil have been talking about the best way to help employees understand this. And we are going to, and you know, we've already had a conversation here that's gotten into some detail, but we want to start with the employees, really with the vision and the mission and the goals, and then get into the key performance indicators after folks have a time to kind of socialize with the first level of detail. So that's a work in progress, but they're really spending a lot of time making sure that we don't that we introduce it to employees in a way that they understand. And then when it comes to the department level KPIs, we're going to ask the directors to take the lead on cascading that down through their departments. So far, you know, it's been at a high level. They've had their senior managers engaged in the training. And then when we get to March, they're going to start to kind of have, you know, discussions and town halls and meetings with their own employees, so their own employees can understand, you know, why we selected these 5, what does a service level KPI. So it's going to cascade down that way.
Okay, thank you, because I know buy-in is important.
Thank you. I do just have one additional question. Given, it sounds like after Commissioner Lube's comment, so given KPIs appear to not be specific to individuals, but rather specific to departments.
Yes.
Would departments face consequences for underperforming?
No, this isn't a gotcha system that we're creating here. Now, I would say, and I give this caveat, is if somebody's not wanting to help resolve the problem, so if we're in red in a particular metric and we're trying to resolve and someone's folding their hands and not being part of it, then that's a different discussion altogether. It's not about the metric itself, it's about the behavior that's being exhibited. But this isn't about punishing a department or punishing an individual or a director. It's about establishing goals and trying to reach out and achieve those goals. And if we are falling short of those, what do we need to do to come together? Because that's really the essence of a good organization, is those that come together when things aren't getting done. And how do they resolve that? And how do they get around the table or wherever it is to figure out what the issues are and how to solve those problems.
And I think there's a linkage between your question and Commissioner Jackson's question, which is, we are serious about this concept of a learning culture, a learning organization, and we have to make sure that our employees understand what that means. That means that, you feel secure enough to offer ideas. You feel secure enough to make a mistake and to learn from a mistake. And so we are talking to some folks who have experience in this area about how do you do trainings and workshops around, a learning culture and a learning organization for our directors and our supervisors, so that when they're managing people, they're also conveying how Dave Coulter feels about this and how Sean just explained it to you, that it is not, punitive. It is empowering. It is how do we work together to make progress. There's another phase that we'll get to later after we collect some data that Andrew has experience in, which is called turning the curve, where it is another process that you go through and you identify something that you're trying to change and how you bring people together to evaluate how you turn the curve on something. So we have that planned out in the future, all under the umbrella that we want to convey that this is a learning organization.
And I think that's key. I just want to underscore what Hillary just said. Learning organization. There are a lot of great ideas from employees that have been around for 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20, that will not stand up and share those with us. And we need to get to a place, a collaborative place, and create this learning culture that they can come forward with those ideas too. And that's very important.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that, because I think we all know that growth doesn't happen in toxic, punitive work environments. So to make it more of a supportive and inclusive environment is key to growth and development in new areas. So I love hearing you say that. And lastly, since we've been talking about the KPIs, can you please just give some examples of key performance indicators being measured?
You have the department one?
Yes.
The community one?
So let me share. Well, I'll be biased and share my thriving and inclusive.
That's community, though.
Oh,
Do you have any department ones?
I don't think departmentals are on here, but I'll share some community indicators, right? So for the thriving and inclusive economy, which is Oakland County cultivates entrepreneurs, attracts talent and investment, promotes cutting-edge technology, and strives for an economy that works for all people and businesses of all sizes. So we are looking at 4 measurements in that area. Increased business investment as measured by annual domestic and foreign investment in county companies. Number 2, improve minority business development as measured by the number of minority, women, and veteran-owned companies in the county. Number 3, grow worker wages as measured by the average weekly wage. And the 4th one is decrease child poverty as measured by the percentage of county children living in households that are below the poverty line. So those are the 4. Now, for us to work on these community indicators, who are we going to have to work with? We're going to have to work with Automation Alley. We're going to have to work with the 22 chambers of commerce, the DDAs, the downtown district authorities. We're going to have to work with SEMCOG. These are the organizations that are external to economic development and workforce development. Workforce development's got another set of parameters that we're going to have to interface and work with and collaborate with as well. But there are a set of departmental KPIs as well that will work internally. But that
and
just
those will be more nitty-gritty. Like emergency operations, they might have a department level KPI, which is to increase the number of residents who sign up to Oak Alert. Or, they might have a department level KPI, which is to increase the number of trainings that they do on communities having, emergency response plans. So each department might have very different, ways to measure how they're doing their work. But those would be more nitty-gritty than the community indicator ones.
Excellent. Well, I greatly appreciate you breaking these things down, so thank you. Commissioners, is there any other questions, comments in regards to this agenda item D? Commissioner Jackson?
No, I'm good.
Oh, you're good? All right. Seeing none, please prompt the vote.
Madam Chair, you have 5 yeas, 0 nays.
5 yeas, 0 nay, motion carries. Again, I want to give a gracious thank you to Chief Deputy Chambers and Deputy Executive Carlson for joining us this morning, so thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next up, we'll move on to our last public comment. As a reminder, this public comment is for any item on the agenda, off the agenda, and each individual gets 3 minutes to speak. So at this time, I'd like to open up public comment, and if there's anyone from the public, please come to the head of the table, state your name and community in which you reside in. Good morning.
Good morning, Tasha Shergan from Clarkston. I appreciate the fact that everybody spent the time interviewing those ladies this morning. Mental health is really important these days, as we all know. One of the things I'm very concerned about is leadership in Oakland County. I don't know if you saw Dave Coulter's recent tweet. Let's see, let me pull it up. It says, "Smiling Oxford students is everything. Oxford strong resilience." And it's a picture from, I think it was a basketball game, and the students are all together and they're not wearing their masks, which makes me really happy. But it's so ironic that here he is promoting these smiling, happy students when these kids are in crisis, not just Oxford, but our entire state, and Oakland County is still enforcing an illegal mask mandate. So his lack of leadership, and I'm going to call it abuse. It's abusive to promote these smiling, happy children in one sentence, but forcing these kids, especially the Oxford students, to continue with the trauma they've experienced. We know that not being able to see people's communication, their nonverbal communication in their face, and the disconnect and the social distancing is really affecting everybody. We just had an hour of hearing about it. So I just want to bring this awareness to everybody. And in my opinion, I think he needs to step down. His leadership has been damaging to our county. So thank you. I'll see you guys in 2 weeks.
Thank you, Tasha. Is there anyone else from the public who would like to address the Legislative Affairs and Government Operations Committee? Seeing none, I will close our second public comment. That brings us down to, is there any further business to come before the Legislative Affairs and Government Operations Committee this morning? Alrighty, seeing none, without objection, I declare this meeting adjourned at 11:09 a.m. Thank you, everyone.